Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
Hello everybody, welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper reading. Today we shall be analyzing the Hindu newspaper dated 12th of May 2022 of the New Delhi edition. The topics to be discussed today have been presented on your screen. Time stamping for the same has been provided in the description box below. Let us begin our today's discussion. In continuation with our weekly series of mains assignment question from the Daily News Simplified videos, the question for this particular week here is: highlight the arguments against and in favor of the capital punishment. Analyze the position of death penalty in India as provided by the Supreme Court in the Bachchan Singh case. The answer to this particular question has to be written in 250 words. Before writing the answer to this particular question, I would suggest you to go through the DNS dated 29th of April 2022, in which we have covered all the aspects related to capital punishment. The first article of the day appears on page number 1. The article is titled as Supreme Court slams the government claim that only the president has a pardoning power. This article shall be important mainly with respect to GS paper 2, Polity and Governance. See, Pirari Valan is one of a person who has been convicted with respect to the assassination case of the former Prime Minister Mr. Rajiv Gandhi. Pirari Valan was arrested way back in the year 1999 and subsequently he was sentenced to the capital punishment. Now, with respect to his mercy plea, a number of controversies or flashpoints have emerged between different entities. It has led to a flashpoint between the center and state, particularly with respect to who has the authority or who has the power to dispose of the mercy plea petition of Pirari Valan, whether it is a center or whether it is the state government of Tamil Nadu. It has also led to a kind of flashpoint between center and the judiciary, and it has also highlighted the controversial role of the governor in Indian polity. So since this particular article becomes important, particularly with respect to federal tensions between center and states, between center and the judiciary, and with respect to controversial role of governor, this particular article becomes quite important. Hence, from the perspective of the UPSC examination, that is from the perspective of both prelims as well as mains, one should be aware about various basics related to the clemency powers of the executive, that is the clemency powers of the president under Article 72 and the clemency powers of the governor under Article 161. One should also be aware about various Supreme Court judgments which are provided for clarifications with respect to how the president and the governor should exercise the clemency powers, and the recent controversy over the mercy plea petition of Pirari Valan. So keeping in mind the requirements of the UPSC prelims and mains examination, let us discuss these three topics one by one, starting with the basics, that is the clemency powers of the executive. See, whenever a particular person is convicted of offences, such a person is handed out punishment. That punishment may be in the form of death penalty, rigorous imprisonment and so on. So such a person who is actually serving a sentence and who has been convicted, such a person can file for the clemency either before the president or before the governor. He can file for a mercy petition before the president under Article 72 of the Indian Constitution, and the filing of mercy petition before the governor of a state is in accordance with Article 161 of the Constitution. The reason as to why we have provided the clemency powers to the executive is to correct certain judicial errors that may have crept in while deciding on a particular case, or to provide certain relief from the sentence which the executive may feel is little harsh. Now, with respect to types of clemency powers, we have different types of clemency powers which include the pardon, commutation, remission, respite and reprieve. When it comes to pardoning, pardon basically means here that the executive would remove both the sentence as well as the conviction. So if a particular person is convicted of an offense and if such a person has been pardoned, then it means that such a person has been given complete forgiveness and such a person can actually go on to lead a normal life. When it comes to commutation, in case of commutation, a harsher punishment can be replaced by a lighter punishment. Now, for example, let's say a particular person has been awarded with a death penalty which is say little harsher. So this death penalty can be replaced by a lighter punishment of rigorous lifetime imprisonment. When it comes to remission, in case of remission, actually the character of the sentence or the character of punishment remains the same, but the duration of the punishment may get reduced. Now, for example, let's say a particular person has been sentenced to 10 years of rigorous imprisonment for a particular offense. So this 10 years of rigorous imprisonment can be reduced to say 5 years of rigorous imprisonment. So as you can see here, in this case, the character of punishment, that is a rigorous imprisonment, that remains the same. But the duration for which a person is required to serve the sentence, that has got reduced. Earlier, it was 10 years and now it is 5 years. When it comes to respite, in case of respite, a far lesser punishment is awarded by taking into account certain special facts related to a particular case. For example, on account of certain special circumstances such as disability of the convict, pregnancy, etc., the government may decide to reduce the amount of punishment. And last is with respect to reprieve. In case of reprieve, it is basically a temporary stay on the execution of a sentence. So normally this particular reprieve is given to the persons who are on the death sentence. So when we provide for a temporary stay on the death sentence, we're actually giving them the time so that such a person can file for a mercy petition before the president. So as stated before, both the president as well as governor have the clemency powers, but there are certain important differences with respect to the clemency powers exercised by the president and the governor. Let's understand these things. First and foremost, only the president has the power to pardon a death sentence, whereas the governor, he cannot pardon a death sentence. So please understand here that with respect to pardoning powers, only the president has the authority to pardon a death sentence, whereas a governor cannot pardon a death sentence. But at the same time, when it comes to commutation of a death sentence, so as I said, commutation basically means that is replacing the harsher punishment by a lighter punishment. So with respect to commutation of a death sentence, both the president as well as governor have a power to commute a death sentence. So even the governor can commute a death sentence to a rigorous imprisonment, but the governor as such cannot pardon a death sentence. So this is the most important difference. Secondly, the president can exercise his clemency powers for the offences that are committed against a law passed by the Indian Parliament, whereas the governor can exercise the clemency powers for the offences which have been committed against a law which are passed by the concerned state legislature. So here you must understand that even if a particular state law provides for a death sentence, even in that particular case also, the governor cannot pardon a death sentence. It is the president alone who can pardon the death sentence, whether the offences are against the central law or against the state law. And lastly, president alone has the clemency powers with respect to the punishments which are awarded by the military courts. Over a period of time, the Supreme Court of India has given a number of judgments in order to provide much higher clarification with respect to exercise of the clemency powers by the president and the governor. First and foremost, in the Maruram versus the Union of India case, the Supreme Court has clearly highlighted that both the president as well as governor cannot exercise their discretionary powers with respect to deciding on the mercy petitions. Both the president as well as governor need to act on the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers with respect to disposing of the mercy petitions. So they cannot decide on their own. They have to decide based upon the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers. But at the same time, one must understand here that there is no time period or time frame within which the president or the governor have to take a decision with respect to disposing of a mercy petition. So since the Indian Constitution does not impose a time limit on deciding of the mercy petitions, so most of the time it so happens that either the Council of Ministers will not aid and advise the president or the governor with respect to what actions they should take with respect to the mercy petitions. This is the first thing. And second, say in case of the state government, the State Council of Ministers advise the governor to decide in the favor or against a mercy petition. It has been normally observed that the governor of a particular state keeps a decision pending. This is so because there is no time period within which the governor has to take a decision. Second, see, as stated before, since there is no time frame within which the president or the governor has to take a decision with respect to disposing the mercy petition, usually there is a large amount of delay with respect to deciding on a mercy cases. The Supreme Court of India, in a very famous case known as Shatrughan Chauhan versus Union of India case, stated that inordinate and unexplained delay in disposing of the mercy petitions violates Article 21 dealing with the right to life of the individuals. Accordingly, in this particular famous case, the Supreme Court highlighted that whenever there is an undue delay and unexplained delay in disposing of the mercy petitions, in such cases, accordingly, the death sentence would be commuted to lifetime imprisonment. And lastly, in case of Ipuru Sudhakar case, the Supreme Court has highlighted that even when the executive, that is the president or the governor, take decisions with respect to disposing the mercy petitions, the judicial review is still applicable. The judicial review will be applicable when the Supreme Court believes that the executive has taken a decision without application of mind, if the order is malified, or if the order is arbitrary. So on the basis of these three grounds, the Supreme Court can actually review a decision taken by the president or the governor with respect to disposing of the mercy petitions. So these are some of the basics that you need to understand as far as the clemency powers of the executive is concerned. So now let's understand the latest controversy over the disposing the mercy plea petition of Perari Valan. In order to understand the latest controversy, we need to go back to the year 1994. That was when Perari Valan was convicted in the assassination case of former Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi, and he was subsequently handed out the death penalty. Later, in the year 2003, Perari Valan filed for a mercy petition before the President of India under Article 72. So basically, Perari Valan wanted that the President should commute his death sentence to, say, lifetime imprisonment. So accordingly, he filed for a mercy petition before the President under Article 72. But as highlighted before, there is no time frame or time limit within which the President has to decide on a mercy petition. So accordingly, until 2014, the President of India did not decide on this particular mercy plea or the mercy petition. Further, as highlighted before, in case of Shatrughan Chauhan versus Union of India case, the Supreme Court had ruled that whenever there is inordinate delay, whenever there is a kind of unexplained delay, the death sentence of a particular person can be commuted to lifetime imprisonment. Accordingly, here, Mr. Perari Valan had filed for a mercy petition way back in the year 2003, and in spite of almost 11 years, the President of India had kept the decision pending. So this in turn was considered by the Supreme Court as a violation of Article 21. Accordingly, in the year 2014, the Supreme Court of India decided to commute the death sentence of Perari Valan to lifetime imprisonment. So the benefit which Perari Valan got because of Supreme Court was that his death sentence got commuted to lifetime imprisonment. Later, in the year 2015, Perari Valan filed for a mercy petition, this time before the Tamil Nadu governor under Article 161. So first time he filed for a mercy petition before the President. Second time he filed for a mercy petition before the governor. First time his mercy petition was that his death sentence should be commuted to, say, lifetime imprisonment. And now in the year 2015 he filed for a mercy petition before the governor for his release, which means now he wanted that his lifetime imprisonment should be actually changed to his full-time release. So he wanted that he should be released from the prison, and accordingly he filed for a mercy petition before the governor. In the year 2018, that is 3 years later, the State Cabinet of Tamil Nadu, that is the Council of Ministers in Tamil Nadu, recommended the governor to release Perari Valan. So here the State Cabinet of Tamil Nadu recommended the governor to dispose of the mercy petition and allow for the release of Perari Valan. This took place in the year 2018. But once again, as I said, there is no time frame, time limit within which the governor of a state should decide on the mercy petition. So here, for next 3 years, that is until 2021, the Tamil Nadu governor kept the decision pending. So ideally, when the cabinet of Tamil Nadu recommended the governor for his release, the governor had two options. he could have taken the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers and accordingly allowed for the release of Pararivalan, or he could have kept the decision pending. So here the governor of Tamil Nadu exercised the second option and he kept the decision pending for next 3 years. Ultimately, this time the matter reached the Supreme Court once again. So before it was the president who delayed taking decision and it reached the Supreme Court, and now it was the governor who delayed taking decision and it reached the Supreme Court in Jan 2021. So this time the Supreme Court asked the governor of Tamil Nadu to take decision on the mercy petition of Pararivalan at the earliest. But this time, when the Supreme Court asked governor to take the decision at the earliest, very interestingly, the Tamil Nadu governor referred this mercy petition to the president. I hope all of you must be knowing that whenever a bill is passed by the state legislature, this particular bill goes to the governor for his assent. And in some of the cases, the governor can reserve this particular bill for the consideration of the president. Now, this is what happens in case of a bill. But what if it is a mercy petition? So let's say there is a mercy petition which has been filed by a particular person before the governor. Now, question is, once this mercy petition comes before the governor, just like how the governor reserves a bill for the consideration of the president, can the governor keep this mercy petition for the consideration of the president? Now, this is a question which has arisen now. Now, if you look at our Indian Constitution, there is no provision in the Indian Constitution which would enable the governor to reserve a mercy petition before the president. The governor can do it when it comes to a bill, but the governor as such cannot do it when it comes to the mercy petition. So when a mercy petition comes to the governor as such has to go according to aid and advice given by the State Council of Ministers. But in this particular case, even though the State Council of Ministers have recommended the governor for the release of Pararivalan, the governor in this particular case has not taken the advice of the Council of Ministers. Instead, the governor has decided to reserve this mercy petition for the consideration of the president. So this in turn has created a kind of flashpoint between the center and the government of Tamil Nadu. Just imagine as to what would happen if the State Council of Ministers keep on advising governor with respect to disposing of mercy petitions. And in each of these cases, if the governor keeps on keeping such mercy petitions for the consideration of the president, then obviously it will lead to a federal tension between the center and the states. Now this is as far as the flashpoint or the point of friction between center and states. Now what about center versus Supreme Court? Let's understand this. See, as far as the central government is concerned, the central government is of the opinion that Pararivalan has already got benefited through the Supreme Court judgment. So as discussed before, the Supreme Court has already commuted his death sentence to lifetime imprisonment. So since this particular person has already got the benefit through a Supreme Court judgment, this person should not be able to get the benefit of release once again. So this is the first argument given by the center. Secondly, the center is also arguing that the governor of the state of Tamil Nadu cannot decide on a mercy petition against the central law. So in this case, Pararivalan has committed an offence against a law which is passed by the Indian Parliament. So since he has committed an offence against the central law, the president alone has the power to decide on such mercy petitions. The governor of Tamil Nadu cannot decide on a mercy petition on an offence which has been created against central law. So this is the argument as far as the central government is concerned. On the other hand, as far as Supreme Court is concerned, the Supreme Court has said that already mercy petition was filed before the office of governor way back in the year 2015. That time itself, the Tamil Nadu governor should have rejected the mercy petition, saying that he does not have the power to decide on a case or on an offence which has been committed against central law. But instead of disposing of this mercy petition, the governor of Tamil Nadu kept the decision pending. So the first problem here is there was delay in disposing the mercy petition. And second one here is the governor of Tamil Nadu as such does not have the power under the Indian Constitution in referring the mercy petition to the president. So ideally, in this particular case, the governor should have sent back the recommendations to the Council of Ministers of the state of Tamil Nadu, asking that since Pararivalan has committed an offence against central law, he cannot pass an order for the release of Pararivalan. But instead of sending it back for the reconsideration of Council of Ministers, the governor on his own exercised the discretionary powers and decided to refer this particular mercy petition to the president. So as you can see, a number of controversies have arisen between center and states, between the center and judiciary with respect to the recent mercy plea petition. The Supreme Court of India has now decided to take up this particular case and decide on whether the governor can refer the mercy plea petition to the president. So hopefully in future, the Supreme Court of India will re-examine all of these points and it is set to come up with a new judgment or a new order. So let us wait and watch as to what developments will take place after the Supreme Court passes its judgment or the order. So these are some of the important aspects that one should know as far as this particular article is concerned. With this, let us now take up the next article. The next article appears on page number 7 in the form of a data point. The article is titled as Weak Rupee, Bleak Climate. I hope all of you must be knowing that the international crude oil prices have increased to more than $100 per barrel. Apart from that, due to the adoption of Fed tapering by the US Fed Bank, there has been higher outflow of FPIs from the Indian economy. So on account of multiple factors, the value of rupee vis-a-vis dollars has depreciated to its all-time low of 77.36 against the US dollars. So as you can see, in the previous year prelims, repeatedly questions have been asked with respect to various aspects of the exchange rate management. For example, questions have been asked with respect to what factors can lead to the rupee depreciation, what measures the government or the RBI is likely to take in order to check the rupee depreciation, and so on. So as far as your UPSC prelims examination is concerned, one should be aware about the reasons, impact, and what steps are needed to be taken in order to counter the rupee depreciation. See, all of these factors which are important from the perspective of UPSC prelims, I have already discussed this in the DNS dated 8th of March 2022. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to attach this particular DNS for the sake of your revision. We will discuss this entire topic in terms of certain prelims based questions. So I will be discussing 3 prelims based questions, wherein one prelims based question is with respect to the factors that lead to the rupee depreciation. One question is with respect to the effects of the rupee depreciation on the Indian economy. And one question is with respect to what steps are likely to be taken in order to counter the rupee depreciation. So let's first understand some of the important aspects of the rupee depreciation. See, the value of rupee can change from $1 is equal to 60 to $1 is equal to 70. So this particular change in the exchange rate of the Indian currency can be considered as rupee depreciation. The question is, why do we call it as rupee depreciation? Now here, as you can see, earlier to get $1, you are required to pay rupees 60. Now to get the same $1, you are required to pay rupees 70. That is, you are required to pay 10 rupees more to get the same $1, right? So that is why it is referred to as rupee depreciation. The question is, why does the rupee value depreciate? Now, for example, let's take the case of an apple. One apple was costing you rupees 10 yesterday, and same apple now is costing you rupees 20. So as you can see, the cost of apple has increased, whereas the purchasing power of the Indian currency has got reduced. Now, why does this cost of apple increase? The cost of apple would increase when the demand for apple increases, or say the supply of apple reduce. Now extend the same logic to that of dollar. Now as you can see, $1 was costing us 60 rupees yesterday. Now $1 is costing us 10 rupees more, that is rupees 70, which means that the dollar value has appreciated or increased. Now why would the dollar value appreciate? This is because the demand for dollar could increase, or say the supply of dollar in the economy reduces. So overall, because the demand for dollar has increased, the supply of dollar reduced, the value of dollar vis-a-vis Indian currency, this dollar value would increase. And this dollar value increases predominantly because whenever we have a shortage of dollars. So when the dollar value increases, the value of rupee vis-a-vis dollar reduces. Now question is, why will the demand for dollar in the economy increase, or why will the supply reduce? Now this could be on account of multiple factors. For example, if you are importing more of goods and services from other countries, the demand for dollar will increase. or say the cost of import increases. Even in that case also, the rupee value could depreciate. So recently, as you can see, the value of the crude oil has increased. So the cost at which we are importing the crude oil has increased, and that is why the rupee value has also got depreciated. Now, as far as the supply of dollar, this reduces because of decrease in exports, decrease in FDI or FPI, decrease in remittances into India, and so on. So what happens in case of rupee depreciation is the overall dollar outflow from the Indian economy would be more than the dollar inflows, which in turn creates shortage of dollars. Shortage of dollars leads to increase in the value of dollar, and hence the rupee value would depreciate. Now, how does it impact the Indian economy? First and foremost, as you can see here, it is being said that the rupee depreciation would benefit the exporters and would adversely affect the importers. Why? Now, for example, let's say you as an exporter, you are exporting a commodity worth $1. So when you are converting this $1 into Indian rupee, you are getting rupees 60. But now when you export the same commodity, you would get the $1. But when you exchange this $1 into Indian rupee, you are getting 10 rupees more. So you as an exporter, you would gain more by exporting. That is why you would try to export as many goods and services to other countries in order to gain more profits. Whereas if you look at it from the importer perspective, let's say to import a commodity you are paying $1 earlier, which means to get this $1 you are paying 60. Now to import the same commodity worth $1, you are paying rupees 10 more. That is, you are paying rupees 17 now, which means now for you the imports have become costly. So whenever the rupee value depreciates, exports from India could increase. That is, in a way, the exports become more competitive, whereas the imports could become costly. Now let's understand as to what would happen as far as Indian economy is concerned in the long run. That is when the rupee value depreciates. Now you must understand that India is majorly a importing country. That is, our imports are much higher than our exports. Now, as I said, whenever the rupee value depreciates, exports from India would increase, which means, can I say here that there will be more dollar inflows into India because of increase in exports, right? On similar lines, when it comes to imports, my imports have become costly. And especially if you look at India, we import huge amount of crude oil, gold, and so on. So because my imports have become costly, the dollar outflow from the Indian economy would be higher. So as you can see, there are two things which are happening here. Because of imports becoming costly, more amount of dollar is going out of country, and because my exports have increased, more amount of dollar is coming into the country. Now, what do you think would be the net effect of these two things? Will the dollar supply in the Indian economy increase or decrease? What do you think about it? Now, you must understand that our imports are much higher than our exports, which clearly means that whenever the rupee value depreciates, more amount of dollar would go out of India than the amount of dollar coming into India. So here, in the long run, what happens is the outflow of dollars due to costly imports, this will be much higher than the dollar inflows due to increase in exports. Now, just for the sake of example, let's say because the rupee value has depreciated, my exports have increased by, for example, $10 billion. But at the same time, you must understand that the imports have become costly. So here, my cost of imports may have risen by, say, $25 billion. So what is the net effect here? The net effect is minus $15 billion as far as the Indian economy is concerned. So we will have further shortage of dollars. And since we'll have further shortage of dollars, once again, the rupee value will depreciate. So in the long run, please do understand that as the rupee value undergoes depreciation, the imports into India will become costly, whereas exports would increase, and the net effect would be a further depreciation in the value of the Indian currency. Now let us take up these three prelims questions for practice. The first question is, which among the following reasons could possibly lead to the rupee depreciation in India? First one is decline in exports. Second one is increase in imports. adoption of Fed tapering in US, and increase in the rate of inflation within India. We know for sure that the first two options are correct. When it comes to the third option, adoption of Fed tapering in US. So whenever the US Fed Bank adopts a Fed tapering, the rate of interest in the US economy are likely to increase in future. So this future increase in rate of interest in turn leads to higher dollar outflows from the Indian economy, and hence the adoption of Fed tapering would obviously lead to the rupee depreciation. If you want to understand about the adoption of Fed tapering in US and how it is likely to affect the Indian economy, I have already discussed this in much greater detail in the economic survey video. You can go through that particular video. The next option is increase in the rate of inflation within India. Now we know that inflation may take place because of increase in demand or shortage of supply of certain critical goods. Now let's understand from the perspective of demand. Now let's say there is increase in demand for certain goods and services within the Indian economy. So increase in demand for goods and services within the Indian economy would lead to more of imports into India from other countries. So increase in imports would obviously lead to the rupee depreciation. Similarly, the inflation may take place because of supply side bottlenecks. For example, let's say because of failure of monsoons, suddenly there is a decline in the production of edible oils, or for that matter, there is a decline in the production of pulses. So what we would do in this particular case is, in order to increase the supply of these agricultural commodities, we will import these agricultural commodities into the Indian economy. So once again, the imports are likely to increase. So whenever there is an inflation within India, either the demand will increase or the supply is lower. So when the demand increases, we'll import more from other countries. When the supply of certain essential goods is lower, and which leads to inflation, we'll try to increase the supply by importing these goods from other countries. So once again, imports will increase, and hence it will lead to rupee depreciation. So the right answer to this particular question is 1, 2, 3 and 4. Now coming to the second question. The question is, which among the following can be considered as effects of rupee depreciation in India? The first one is increase in the rate of inflation. Now we have discussed that whenever the rupee value depreciates, the imports into India becomes costly. And that is why it can lead to the imported inflation. The second one is decrease in the cost of external borrowings. Now, when the rupee value depreciates, the example could be $1 was equal to 60. Now, $1 is equal to rupees 70, which means earlier when you had borrowed $1, you had got rupees 60. Now, to pay back the same $1, you would be required to pay 10 rupees more, that is rupees 70. So, the cost of external borrowings would not decrease. Rather, the cost of external borrowings would increase whenever the rupee value depreciates. The next option is decrease in the current account deficit. So what do you think will happen to current account deficit? See, we have discussed that whenever the rupee value depreciates, imports in India become costly, whereas exports become competitive. But since our imports are much higher than our exports, the net impact will be there will be more outflow of dollars from the Indian economy. And since our imports are much higher than our exports, the current account in case of India, the deficit on this account will further increase rather than decreasing. So usually whenever the rupee value depreciate, the current account deficit would increase rather than decrease. So the third option is actually wrong. The fourth option is increase in export competitiveness, which as we discussed is correct. So the right answer should be 1 and 4 only. Now coming to the last prelims based question. The question is, which among the following steps are not likely to be taken to counter the rupee depreciation? See, to counter the rupee depreciation, what we must do is we must enhance the overall dollar supply within the Indian economy. So as the dollar supply in the Indian economy increases, dollar value, which was earlier appreciating, this will reduce, and as the dollar value reduces, the rupee value will increase. So if you want to counter the rupee depreciation, we would have to increase the dollar supply. Now look at the options which are given here. Here it says decrease in the policy rates. Now imagine if RBI reduces the policy rates. Now what will happen in that particular case is the money supply or the rupee supply in the economy would increase. As the money supply or the rupee supply increases, this will lead to a further depreciation, because higher the supply, lower would be the value of the rupee. So obviously this option is ruled out. If you look at option 2 and option 3, if you enhance the FDI limit in various sectors, the dollar supply would increase. This is correct. If you restrict the capital outflows, once again, we would be able to prevent the outflow of dollar supply from the Indian economy, which is also a likely option taken to counter the rupee depreciation. And the next one is suck out dollars from the economy. So whenever the rupee value depreciate, rather than sucking out dollars, we need to inject the dollars into the economy. So this is not the likely step to be taken by the government or the RBI. So the right answer here is 1 and 4 only. The next article appears on page number 1. The article is titled as Supreme Court puts the colonial sedition law on hold. This article shall be important mainly with respect to GS paper 2, polity and governance. See, in yesterday's DNS, we have discussed in detail about the sedition law. So in yesterday's DNS, we have covered various aspects such as what is the sedition law, what are the problems and challenges with respect to sedition law, the Supreme Court judgments on sedition law, and the Law Commission recommendations. So since all the aspects related to sedition law have already been covered in yesterday's DNS, I will not go into these aspects once again. I will confine my discussion only to the latest Supreme Court judgment when it comes to the sedition law. So in yesterday's DNS, we have read about section 124A of IPC, which provides for sedition. Under this particular section, any person by words, that is either spoken or written, through signs or any kind of visible representation, promotes hatredness, contempt or disaffection towards the government, then such a person shall be charged under the sedition law and such a person shall be imprisoned for life. The reason or the rationale behind having a sedition law is to ensure peace and stability in a democratic country such as ours. It is also to ensure that people don't misuse their fundamental rights. Now, for example, if people misuse their fundamental rights to incite violence against the government, then this will threaten the unity and integrity of India. It will threaten the peace and stability in India. Hence, in order to promote the unity and integrity, ensure the sovereignty, and to prevent the misuse of rights of the people, what we have is a sedition law. But the problem here is this implementation of the sedition law has in turn led to a number of problems. For example, if you see, the hallmark of any democracy is based upon 3 Ds. The 3 Ds here stand for discussion, debate and dissent. So in any country, we should promote discussion among the people. We must promote debate, and people should also be allowed to dissent the government schemes, policies, government laws and so on. So only when we are able to promote these 3 Ds freely, then the democracy as such will be more matured. The citizens in a particular country will be more enlightened. So if you are clamping down on these 3 Ds, that is discussion, debate and dissent, this will not only violate the fundamental right of speech and expression of the people, but it will also go against the democratic norms. If you are clamping down on these 3 Ds, then there will be no difference between the pre-independence era, that is the British era, and the post-independence era in which we are living. Moreover, it has been observed that consecutive governments have misused the provisions of sedition law to clamp down on dissent. So if anyone was found to be criticizing the government's policies, criticizing the government, then such people were charged under the sedition law. So the sedition law as such had become a tool for the government to clamp down on dissent. So on account of all of these problems, the Supreme Court in a landmark case known as Wombard-Carey versus Union of India case, the Supreme Court has now decided to put the sedition law on hold. What do you mean by putting sedition law on hold? So here the Supreme Court has asked the centre to reconsider and re-examine the sedition law. This basically means that the centre should go back to the drawing table, look into all the provisions of the sedition law and then contemplate as to whether we need such a law in the first place, and if we need it, how to tune it in line with the modern democratic norms. So please understand here that the Supreme Court has not declared the sedition law to be unconstitutional and void. What it has basically said is that the center should go back to the drawing table and re-examine the sedition law. And until the time the center re-examines the sedition law, both the center as well as the state government, they should not file new FIRs under the sedition law, which means the sedition law as such has been kept in abeyance. Its implementation has been suspended. So since its implementation has been suspended, both the center as well as states have been asked not to register new FIRs under the sedition law. And in case if FIRs get registered under the sedition law, then the parties as such, that is the people who have got affected because of registration of FIRs, these people can freely approach the concerned courts. Apart from that, right now there are a number of trials, number of appeals, a number of proceedings under the sedition law before various courts across India. So Supreme Court has now said that all these pending trials, appeals and proceedings will be kept in abeyance. That is until the time the central government re-examines the sedition law. So we will not proceed with the pending trials, appeals and proceedings under the present sedition law. And last and most important, the center and state governments have been asked to issue directions to the concerned authorities to prevent the misuse of the sedition law. So these are some important developments which have taken place with respect to Supreme Court judgment in Wombat Kere versus Union of India case. Apart from this, please go through the yesterday's DNS in order to comprehensively understand all the aspects related to sedition law. The next article appears on page number 2 of the text and context page. The article is titled as Shallow and Deep Ecologism. This particular article basically seeks to explain the meaning of the term ecologism and accordingly also explains the variants of ecologism, that is the shallow ecologism and deep ecologism. See, as far as your UPSC examination is concerned, there is no need for you to go into a lot of depth related to ecologism. You basically have to understand its meaning and its importance. So as far as this particular term is concerned, this particular term you can use it in GS paper 3 while writing an answer on a question related to environment and biodiversity. You can use this particular term while writing an essay on any topic related to environment, and you can also use this in your GS paper 4, that is ethics, with respect to the environmental ethics. So let us try to understand the meaning of the term ecologism. See, ecologism is basically a kind of political theory which developed in 1970s in response to growing social, environmental and economic problems. This particular theory believes that the economic problems, the social problems, the environmental problems that we are facing right now, to a large extent these problems have arisen because of the growing imbalance between human beings and nature. Now, for example, if you go back to the Industrial Revolution era, during this Industrial Revolution era, human beings were placed at the center of the development. So it is believed that the human beings should exploit the nature for their own benefit, for their own maximization. So the Industrial Revolution era, the human beings were placed at the center of development and we place utmost importance to human welfare, human development. And we did not place much emphasis on the protection of the environment. So that time, if you look at the nature of relationship between human beings and environment, it was more of a master-slave relationship, where human beings were considered to be a kind of masters and nature or the environment was considered to be a kind of slave which should serve the needs of the master. So this particular concept that the nature of relationship between human beings and environment is in a form of a master-slave relationship, this aspect was actually challenged by the evolution of ecologism in 1970s. This particular theory seeks to emphasize that the production and conservation of nature is as important as the development of human welfare or the human well-being. So accordingly, this particular theory calls for changing the individual behavior so as to restore the balance between the natural environment and the human beings. So here, this theory believes that rather than exploiting the nature for our own welfare or for our own gains, we need to follow live and let live approach, which means that we must give emphasis to both human beings as well as all other living beings as well. Now, with respect to this aspect of ecologism, two variants have got developed. One is a shallow ecologism and another one is a deep ecologism. So both this shallow and deep approach focuses on changing the individual behavior in order to restore the delicate balance between the human beings and nature. But the difference lies in the fact that the shallow ecologism focuses on a conservative approach, whereas the deep ecologism is more radical in its approach. Radical in what way? For example, the deep ecologism places equal amount of emphasis on both human beings as well as all other living beings. On the other hand, the shallow ecologism places a much higher emphasis on human beings and comparatively less emphasis on the nature. Further, the difference also lies in the way they approach the environment. Now, when it comes to shallow ecologism, it focuses on the conservative pollution control and conservation of environment, whereas the deep ecologism is more radical in its approach. For example, apart from focusing on conventional measures such as controlling of pollution, environmental conservation, it also focuses on making radical policies for the safety and protection of the environment. Now, for example, if you look at the shallow ecologism, it basically focuses on use of vehicles which are less polluting or the use of air conditioners that do not release the chlorofluorocarbons. While on the other hand, the deep ecologism focuses on redesigning the entire transportation system to reduce the impact of climate change. Now, for example, as part of deep ecologism, we may try to design the entire transportation system based on electric vehicles. Similarly, we may try to replace the internal combustion engines with that of, say, bicycles. So here it calls for radical change in the individual behavior so that we are able to promote environmental protection as well as safety. So these are some important things which one should know as far as this particular article is concerned. The next article appears on page number 6. The article is titled as Still a Long Way for Termination as an Unconditional Right. This article shall be important from the perspective of GS paper 2, Polity and Governance. Now this particular article basically discusses the present legal framework for abortion in India, and accordingly it highlights various issues and challenges with respect to abortion rights of the women. As far as these aspects which are important from the perspective of the UPSC examination is concerned, all of these aspects we have already covered in our DNS dated 3rd of Jan 2022. As you can see in this particular DNS, we have covered the Medical Termination of Pregnancy Act 1971, the amendments which are introduced in the year 2020, and what are the issues and challenges even after the introduction of the new amendment. So all of these aspects we have covered in the DNS dated 3rd of Jan 2022. The link to this particular DNS video has been provided in the description box below. With this, we have come to the end of today's discussion. Let us now have a look at the question for the day. The answer to the question that was asked in yesterday's DNS is option D.